Hi everyone, welcome to Human Biology. This lesson is the first in a series for Year 11 ATAR, and today we are going to be looking at the cell, the basic structure of the body, and its contents. Now, these key words are all associated with cells. Now, don't be overwhelmed when we start. This is just to give you an overview of what these words look like. We'll sound them out and we'll go through each one during this lesson. Now, inside of every cell in your body, we have smaller structures that we call organelles. Now, this list shows all the organelles of a cell, and we will talk about each of them in turn. Now, just as an important note, there are two broad types of cells. Those are eukaryotic ones and prokaryotic. Humans have eukaryotic cells, which means that all of our organelles, those little structures inside a cell, are bound by a membrane. Okay, so for this lesson we are going to focus on describing the structure and function of these organelles. Now, you should have access to the Nelson textbook. I'll refer to it throughout these lessons, and it would be a really good idea if you could either read before or after pages 26 to 31 of your textbook. Okay, so we often say that the cell resembles a city. Now, if you think about this analogy, it actually makes a lot of sense. Cities sometimes have a perimeter wall round about it, and that's to stop anything from getting in or out that they don't want. But they will have channels that allow certain things to go in and out when they do want them to. We have power plants, and these power plants make the city function or your cell function. We have factories that manufacture what we want. We have a central location where all that information is stored, and we have little transport mechanisms that allow things to move into and out of the cell or within the cell itself. So the cell, as I've said before, is the basic unit of life. And from this one basic unit, all other structures are made. So we've talked before about the hierarchy. So we have cells, which are single units, tissues, which are a collection of cells forming together to do a particular job. We have lots of tissues which form organs, organ systems, and eventually an organism. So unicellular organisms, such as the amoeba, are single-celled organisms. They only have one cell, and that is all there is to it. So they're very simple. We, on the other hand, humans, are multicellular organisms, and in our body there is estimated to be over 50 trillion cells. So it gives you an idea of the degree of complexity of us. Now, because we're really complex, we need to have different cells that do different functions. Now, this little graphic here shows a cartoon of 4 different types of cells. This is actually a bone cell, believe it or not. This is a muscle cell. This is a neuron or nerve cell. And this little guy here is probably what we have inside our guts and definitely all over our skin. That is bacteria. So you can see that they all look differently. And they all look different because they have a specific function or a role that they play, and they have to be organized in a certain way to fulfill that function. But the one thing that they all have in common is that they all have organelles. Okay, so if you're looking at this video, you will just skip through this YouTube video, but if you're looking at the PowerPoint, I would recommend that you watch this video to help give you an overview and a different point of view. Okay, so we are going to be looking at the cell ultrastructure. And what that means is we're going to be looking at the different parts of a cell. So here I've got a cartoon drawing of a cell, And this is an image taken from your textbook to show you what it looks like when it's magnified. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is the cell or plasma membrane, and this is the barrier that is around the outside of our cell. Now if we look at the detail of it, it's a lot more complex than what we once thought. Now we'll talk about this cell membrane in a different lesson, but for now I just want you to notice that the arrangement, we have these heads sticking on the outside and facing the inside, and we have these tail regions in the middle, and we also have this scattering of proteins. Next thing we're going to be looking at is the cytoplasm. So you should be familiar with this. You should know that this is the jelly or the liquid part of the cell, and this is where most of the chemical reactions take place, and it's the fluid medium for all these other organelles. Next one, really important structure, we have the mitochondrion. So singular is mitochondrion. When we refer to many of them, plural, we talk about mitochondria. Now if we look at this picture here, this is called an electron micrograph. So this is an image taken of a real cell magnified many thousands of times. And this is a cartoon image just to help us understand it. And what we'll notice about these mitochondria is that they have two membranes, one on the outside and this folded up one on the inside. Now, in biology, we have these folds, and it generally helps us to pack a lot more in to a smaller volume. So we've got a really big surface area for chemical reactions to take place, but the volume of that overall structure is pretty small. Now, the mitochondria are really important. They produce energy for the cell through a process known as aerobic respiration. We'll talk about that process later on, but right now what you need to know is that mitochondria produce energy, and that energy is in the form of ATP. The next structure we're going to be looking at is the nuclear membrane. So this is the membrane that surrounds the nucleus of the cell. So here I've got a 3D image of it, and the nuclear membrane is this purple stuff on the outside. Now, the membrane, you can see, has got these tiny little holes in them, which we call pores, similar to what you have in your skin. And these pores allows that nuclear material, that DNA, and something else called RNA to move in and out. So it's a really important structure. The pore itself is just that hole that allows that genetic material to go in and out. So this is the nuclear membrane, and this gap is called the nuclear pore. So that's an important distinction. Third part of the nucleus we're going to look at is this dense grain of material inside here. It's represented in orange over here. Now this is called the nucleolus. The nucleolus is a really important part of the nucleus that makes something called RNA, and it also makes another organelle called ribosomes. Okay, so the nucleus makes RNA and ribosomes. Alright, so now we're moving on to the outside of the nucleus, and we have got these flattened tubule looking things that are all connected by these vertical lines, and attached to them you have these little black dots. So these are the ribosomes. So these are the things that the nucleolus makes. So this endoplasmic reticulum is referred to as rough because it's studded with those ribosomes. And again, here's a electron micrograph to showing you what that really looks like, and this is a cartoon image to help us visualize it. Now, the function of the rough endoplasmic reticulum is to help us synthesize or make proteins and to move them around the cell. Now, if we look at the ribosomes themselves, these little black dots here, remember they are made in the nucleolus and they're attached to the endoplasmic reticulum, making it rough. Now, these ribosomes actually come in two parts. It has this larger part on top and a smaller part underneath, And this nuclear material, which is like an instruction code, feeds through the middle of that big and small subunit. Now, what we need to know right now is that ribosomes are where protein synthesis takes place. So every time your hair grows or your nails grow or you put on muscle, it's ribosomes that are building that new protein for you. This structure down here, it's got a funny name. It's called the Golgi body, or sometimes known as the Golgi apparatus. So once the ribosomes have made our protein, it then goes to our little packaging plant, that's the Golgi body or Golgi apparatus, and it packages up that protein into the shape that it needs to be, and it gets it ready to leave the cell. So you can see in this cartoon picture here, you have the Golgi body, and once it's made the protein, packed up the protein that it has to pack up, it gets it ready and it puts it into these little spheres called secretory vesicles, and it allows them to move out of the cell to go where it needs to go. So we talked about the Golgi body, and I've just touched on the Golgi vesicles, and just to show you that here in this diagram, the Golgi vesicles enclose that ready-made protein, and it transports it outside the cell. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at really important structures. Well, they're all important, but this one in particular is quite topical at the moment. This is the lysosome. So the lysosomes are actually part of your defense mechanism of your body. What these do is these are packets of vesicle that contain really strong digestive enzymes. So if anything gets into your body, such as a food particle that doesn't need to be there, or a piece of bacteria, this lysosome, this packet of digestive enzyme, will fuse with it and destroy it. Okay, so you'll learn more about how that works in year 12, but right now what we need to know is that these large dense grains containing digestive enzymes are called lysosomes, and they can break down any unwanted material. Okay, so we talked about the rough endoplasmic reticulum, that's this stuff here. We also have the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Now the smooth endoplasmic reticulum does a slightly different job. It will synthesize or build up and transport lipids, which are fats. The rough endoplasmic reticulum, just to remind you, that is involved with protein synthesis. Smooth endoplasmic reticulum is involved with lipid synthesis. Okay, now we're going to be looking at something called the centrioles. These, if we look at them over here, it's a bit of a clearer image. These tubular structures, these are involved in mitosis or cell division. Now these centrioles send out spindle fibers, that's these long fibers that will attach to chromosomes and pull them apart during mitosis. So centrioles are involved in the formation of these black threads called spindle fibers. Next thing we're going to be looking at is something called a pinocytotic vesicle. So this pinocytotic vesicle looks similar to the other vesicle that we looked at, the lysosome, but you'll notice how it's clear. So that is just to give you an indication that it's different. This is what they look like in real life, where the arrows are, that's them there. And they allow liquid to get into the cell. Alright, so you can see in this cartoon here we have liquid with different substances dissolved in it. That part of the membrane will nip off and form this pinocytotic vesicle. So this allows liquids to come into the cell. So it's really important that you understand that pinocytotic vesicles allow liquids to come into or leave the cell. Okay, so that's a lot of terminology for you. Here is a table that summarizes those structures and functions that we talked about. Please take a minute to carefully read through these. Sometimes it's helpful to sound out the words to really help you understand what they mean, and it's a really good memory aid. The next slide is going to show you a different picture of a cell, and I'm going to ask you to see if you can label those. So pause the video here, read this information, and maybe review what we have learned so far before you move on. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at another picture of the cell, and we're going to go through and see if you can label this diagram. So I'm going to do this in numerical order, so not necessarily clockwise or anti-clockwise. So we're going to start with number 1. That's the dense region in the middle. That's the nucleolus. Hope you got that right. Number 2 is the nucleus. Number 3, that's a ribosome. If you said rough endoplasmic reticulum, I would accept that because it's pretty hard to see. Number 4, that's a vesicle. Number 5, so if that was the ribosome, number 5 is a rough endoplasmic reticulum. Number 6, Golgi apparatus or Golgi body. Number 7, cytoskeleton. We haven't mentioned that one yet, so that's the cytoskeleton is just the framework of the cell to give it structure, the same way that you have a skeleton. Number 8 is the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Number 9, mitochondrion or mitochondria. Number 10 is a vacuole. Number 11 is the cytosol. That's another way of saying cytoplasm. 12 is a lysosome. 13 are the centrioles. And 14, which is the outside, is the cell membrane. So that's the end of this lesson. I hope that was helpful for you. What I'd like you to do next is to please read the pages in your textbook. It might not be in the one sitting. You can skim read this and then come back to it, but please do make sure that you read that information. I'd then like you to complete questions 1 to 7 on page 31 to 32 of your textbook. Again, you don't have to write in full sentences. You can write one-word answers. You could do this as a mind map. You can make it into a notes. It's whatever you are comfortable doing. But please make sure you consolidate your knowledge of what you've learned so far. And finally, I'd like you to complete a quick quiz at that link there. You will get an email back with your answers, and you can self-assess how you've gone with this lesson.